public meeting to accept comments in the Kentucky Power case. The case number is 2020-00174. This is our third public meeting. We had 2 on Friday. And also we'll have an additional time tomorrow morning before the actual hearing is underway for people to call in. That will be provided on our website tomorrow. Traditionally at public meetings, we've presented a rate making 101, if you will. We're doing a smaller version of that for these hearings because they're virtual, and we know people have many things on their plate, and so for time-wise as well. I'm going to advance this just a second here. Bear with me. I'm trying to advance my slide. Okay, so just brief overview. We'll go over a little bit of the rate making process, and then also cover just at a high level what was on the application for the Kentucky Powers application. Assuming most of you know what was in their application, so we won't spend a lot of time on that. And then we'll have some comments from Commissioner Matthews, and then we'll open it up for people who have signed up to provide comments. Also, if you haven't signed up and you're on the webinar right now and you'd like to submit a comment, you can send that email to, well, I just had it a second ago. It's at the end of this presentation. I have that email address. I don't want to give you the wrong one. Also, I have the email address for providing written comments that will be at the last slide. So, just going over a little bit of the rate making process. Get my slides to advance. There you go. So Kentucky's statutes, KRS 278, they are what define our rate making process. And then we have, regulations that are derived from those statutes, legal principles over time that are applied then to those statutes and regulations that sort of set precedent. Kentucky's not alone in having terminology and in rates that say that rates must be fair, just, and reasonable. And while it's not a defined term, it has generally accepted over time what those principles mean. And if you think about provision of service that has to be safe and reliable, so the customer has that right to have safe and reliable service. And in order to do that, the utility has to be able to have the financial stability to serve those customers. So that's somewhat of that balance of fair, just, and reasonable and what that means. And for investor-owned utilities, they have an opportunity to earn a return on their equity. For the nonprofits, for the co-ops, they have to make sure that their rates are adequate to meet their lender requirements and to maintain their financial stability. A little bit of the rate making timetable. We have a 30-day notice is required in advance. So utility, if they're going to be filing for a rate adjustment, they give an advance notice 30 days out. And then they also, as part of that notice, they post in a paper of circulation in their area. They have to post a public notice, and then the clock starts when they submit their final application that has been deemed a complete application. That starts the clock, and then rates don't take effect for 30 days. Typically, the PSC, we impose a suspension period. In the case of Kentucky Power for this, it's going to be up to January 13, 2021. So that allows the PSC and staff time to do a thorough investigation and review of an application. They're not simple, as everyone knows. And then we have 10 months to complete a case, and then a request for rehearing has to occur within 23 days of a final order.
Seconds in between. I'll text Stephanie.
Sorry. Very uncooperative computer tonight. Rate making is a two-stage process. It begins with determining the revenue requirement, and then the second is the rate design. And so the revenue requirement is what is necessary for the utility to complete to do its operations. The rate design is where we look at the cost allocation across the customer classes, industrial, residential, commercial classes, and lighting as well as one of the classes of customers to be served. And as a basis or a guideline for beginning to determine the revenue requirement is cost of service study that is submitted with the application by the utility. Part of the process always includes intervention. Oh, I didn't advance. I apologize. Mm-hmm. What is not included in a base rate would be things such as fuel cost adjustment, commodity cost, natural gas, environmental compliance costs, demand side management programs if the utility has a program. Those do appear, though, on a customer's bill, but they just are not included in the base rates. Those are generally, they would be a surcharge on a customer's bill. So this is just the high level overview of the Kentucky Power application. I'm not going to read the slides. We're already 15 minutes into our 3-hour time slot. So, but that information is just some of the items that were included in the application, including the rate adjustment and the last item with the net metering tariff, the proposal to end the current tariff beginning in January, with the proposed new tariff being the avoided cost rate. And the existing customers, as you know, as per the legislation that was passed, in 2019 are grandfathered. Interveners in the case are the Attorney General's Office, KIUC, Walmart, Solar Industries Association, Mountain Association of Community Economic Development, and the Kentucky Solar Energy Society. Collectively, they're being represented together, the Sierra Club, and then SWBA. And this is going to last slide here. If I can. Next steps, we're going to have, like I said, tomorrow is the beginning of the hearing, and we will have an opportunity for people to provide comments if they wish to call in tomorrow. That number will be posted on our website. Again, starts tomorrow. It runs through several days are scheduled. It will be virtual, and it also will be live streamed. And there's the email at the bottom if you would like to make comments in the case. And if you check on our website, the number for the call in tomorrow morning will also be posted. So we are going to move.
Good evening. Sorry for that. We took a couple seconds there to make sure the feed was live. We're here today to take public comments in Kentucky Power case number 2020-00174. To reiterate the point made during the overview, the role and obligation of the PSC is to ensure rates are fair, just, and reasonable. My name is Talina Matthews. I'm a commissioner here at the Commission. This meeting is being recorded for the benefit of the public, the record, and in order for Vice Chairman Kent Chandler and Chairman Mike Schmidt to review and consider. The Commission understands that in any rate case proceeding there are strong feelings and opinions. We ask that as you provide comments today that you're respectful and also mindful of the time limit for each speaker. We're here to listen. Kentucky Power is not presenting during the public comment meeting, and neither are the interveners in this case. Kentucky Power and the other parties have their opportunity to make their case during the pendency of the case. This is an opportunity for customers of Kentucky Power and the public to state their positions, concerns, and provide the Commission comments for its consideration. During tonight's comment section, I will not be answering questions. The Commission is the fact finder and decision maker in this case, and as such, the Commissioners are unable to comment or speak to the process or substance of the pending application. Nevertheless, questions you raise during your comments may well be of assistance to the Commission and its staff in adjudicating this matter. If you have questions for Kentucky Power or the parties to this case, you may ask them during this public meeting. That usually works a little better when we're in the same place. And with the anticipation that you may ask the questions during this public meeting, and we will make sure the entities get back to you with an answer. Contact information for the company or the interveners can be received by calling the PSC and speaking to staff at 502-564-3940. Given the number of participants that have initially indicated their interest in providing comments, we will be limiting the length of comments to 8 minutes. I'll let you know when we have 1 minute left. And as always, written comments may be made to the Commission at any time during the consideration of this case and must include your name, address, and state the case number in this matter, 2020-00174. Anyone who may have joined through the Commission website and has not signed up to speak but would nevertheless like to speak, you may do so by emailing psc.meeting psc.ky.gov. That's psc.meeting@ky.gov. The email should include your name, address, phone number, and email address. We'll give you the link to access the platform to speak. We will have an additional opportunity to provide public comment prior to the hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. Information on how to provide comments tomorrow will be on the PSC website, which is psc.ky.gov. When you speak, I would ask that you please provide your name and address prior to your questions and comments, since this is on the record. We will now begin taking comments, and as typical, we are going to start with the public officials who have signed up to speak. There are 3, I believe, and we will start with Senator Wheeler, if he's on the line, and I see that he is. We can't hear you quite yet. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, but that may just be in here. I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, again, Commissioner, thank you.
It wasn't on your end. It was on this end.
Okay. Thank you again for the invitation this evening to speak on this very important matter for my district and Eastern Kentucky in general. I guess I have signed up this evening to speak against this proposed rate increase. Right now is a really challenging time in Eastern Kentucky with the COVID-19 pandemic, and frankly, it was a very challenging time in Eastern Kentucky even prior to this great calamity that has, struck our nation over this past year. Since 2010, we've seen a devastating decline in the coal industry and many other industries throughout Eastern Kentucky that provided most of the region's high-paying jobs. We've seen many folks of working age either placed out of work or who have left the area. In addition, Eastern Kentucky is filled with, in the 31st Senate District, is filled with many people who are on fixed incomes. I am an attorney that represents both injured and disabled people, and I'm well aware of the challenge they face in their day-to-day lives. I often am struck and frankly, having to decide whether or not to, pay for groceries or to pay their power bill. I've also been contacted by constituents who have faced the issue of whether they can buy their insulin or power bill.
I do think that at some point we should check in about the theater sub-hub. Becca, were you able to get Deb Sturgill?
Miss Johnson, if you're on the line, could you please mute?
I'm getting Deb sort of pinned down. Oh, Val has the right idea.
Okay, I think we're getting some cross interference there. I recognize that I value Kentucky Power as a leading player here in Eastern Kentucky and a company that does provide good jobs. My own uncle has worked for the power company for many, many years. But I think as the statute that was recited at the beginning of this meeting stated, that there has to be a balancing act, and timing is part of that balancing act. And frankly, right now is not a good time for a rate increase. Such an increase must be fair, just, and reasonable. And, at the present time, a 16% increase for folks on a fixed income when they're out of work is frankly unsustainable for many. While I recognize that such an increase is being deferred until 2022, based upon the economic data that we have received concerning the economy in Eastern Kentucky, it is very unlikely that the economy will have recovered enough by that time to sustain such an increase. Moreover, I don't think that in the presentation by Kentucky Power that we have seen that this increase is necessary at the present time for the company to maintain a reasonable profitability both for its shareholders and an ability to maintain services to customers throughout Eastern Kentucky. So while I appreciate the services that they provide, I think the rate increase at this point is far too great a burden to apply to the folks in Eastern Kentucky who are struggling economically. And I would request that the Commission take the economic struggles of Eastern Kentuckians into consideration when they request this, when they evaluate this rate increase by Kentucky Power at this point in time. I think such an increase is untimely, and as a result of its untimeliness, I think it would be unjust to the many, many people served by Kentucky Power throughout the 31st Senate District in Eastern Kentucky in general. And I appreciate the time this evening that you're giving me to comment on this matter, and I will therefore pass along to a colleague. I see Representative Hatton online. Good to see you there this evening. And thank you again, members of the Commission, for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Hatton?
Yes, Commissioner, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Senator Wheeler and representatives of the Attorney General's Office for joining us. The Attorney General's Office has had a history of intervening on behalf of the public citizens in AEP Service District to look out for us, and I'm glad to see that that's continuing. This is not my first public hearing. I've participated in a couple, although this is my first virtual public comment hearing, and I thank you for the opportunity, even in the face of COVID, for allowing public comment. It is so important because this is an issue that is not abstract to the people in my district. You know, for the last 3 years, I've filed legislation to require that the Public Service Commission consider affordability when they look at whether rates are fair, just, and reasonable. And it seems like it would be just a no-brainer that affordability be included when you're determining whether rates are fair, just, and reasonable. But in recent years, the Public Service Commission has not interpreted the law to allow them to consider affordability. And I just think that that is a tragedy for the people who live in my district. We have some of the poorest people in the country in Eastern Kentucky, and we have the second highest electricity rates in the country, next to only South Carolina, the last time I checked, certain parts of South Carolina. And there's just no way that on top of the rates that are already so burdensome, that the people in my district can afford an additional rate increase. Other parts of the country had been seeing good economic growth, but that just isn't the case in my district in Letcher and Pike counties. We are not seeing that kind of growth over the past few years. We've seen tremendous downturn in our economy due to the lack of coal jobs. And on top of that, when we already weren't thriving, now we have COVID-19 to deal with, and extreme uncertainty in the face of where this pandemic is going to take us before this vaccine can get distributed. And we even only did a 1-year budget for the state for the first time ever because of so much unpredictability for what's going to happen to our budget next year. And individual Kentucky families are feeling that same uncertainty. So I filed legislation the last few years that would not only have required that affordability be considered, but also that before a rate increase could be considered, that these utility companies should be required to have an audit to make sure that their expenses are not outrageous. There are stories of corporate executives getting $11 million salaries and corporate jet travel that eventually gets billed back to their customers. And we can't, even though a reasonable rate of return is guaranteed, we can't just keep making that rate of return happen on the backs of the citizens of Eastern Kentucky. There has to be a time when reasonableness of expenses of the utilities is taken into account. And also, the legislation I filed would require that the service be good, that people receive good, reliable service from their utilities, even in the winter, even when there's been windstorms before we have increases like this. It's not something that's sustainable for some of the poorest people in the country to continue to pay higher electric rates than anywhere else in the country, save that one part of South Carolina. And then on top of that, to now expect another increase with the state that our economy is in. And I just prevail upon the members of this commission to listen carefully to the human beings who have joined us tonight, who care enough about this that they'll take up their evening to sit on a virtual meeting and just beg for their livelihoods. And these people can't take another increase. I get so many emails, so many calls. I'm sure Senator Wheeler has had the same experience, for people literally begging us to do something about their power bills. And we've had a little bit warmer winters recently, but we can't guarantee that that'll be the case this year. And on top of that, the rate increase also is doing damage to the solar industry, which is one way that not only residences, but nonprofits, small business, fire departments, churches, lots of other organizations had found to find some relief from their power bills. But when we start interfering with the rates of net metering, then we limit the ability of people to recoup their costs from installing solar panels. So it's just one more way that we harm individual families in our communities. So I guess I'll wrap up my comments with just an appeal for humanity in your decision making. And I'm not sure what's going on with my phone now. There we go. That's better. My kids would say, "Okay, boomer," at this point when I mess up the video technology. But thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration. And please consider carefully the effects that these rates have on people like my constituents. Even my grandmother, who's on a fixed income, got a $900 power bill a couple of years back and just sat down at her kitchen table and cried because she did not know how she could possibly afford an electric bill like that. And I hear stories about similar stories all across my region. I bet you're going to hear some of them tonight from the people who cared enough to join. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to Senator Wheeler. Again, thanks to the Attorney General's office. And thank you, commissioners, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Hatton. Is Representative Fugit on the call? I don't see him log in. If he shows up, we'll certainly give him the opportunity as well. I know he, like the other two, really has some strong opinions about this. Okay, well, I think we'll start with the other folks who've signed up. Amelia Pickering.
Hi. I'm unmuted. Thank you for this opportunity. I do live in Whitesburg in Letcher County, and one of the things that's really concerning me, my husband and I are going to retire in a year or two, and as we've been working, you know, we're paying our power bills, although it can get very, very painful, particularly in the winter. But I really am concerned as we retire, you know, how we're going to pay these bills when the rates are constantly going up. And I think that, you know, we will be thinking about, do we want to continue to live in Whitesburg? Do we want to continue to live in Eastern Kentucky? Maybe there are other places in Kentucky where this is not so much a problem, you know, or even leaving the state. And I think that's just part of the vicious cycle that's can happen in Eastern Kentucky when these rates keep going up. It's going to force, you know, potentially more and more people to leave the area, which just makes it, you know, Kentucky Power potentially will want to ask those that stay for higher and higher rates. So I really think this has to be considered. And the other thing that I find, you know, really distressing in what Kentucky Power wants to do is to cripple the solar industry and the ability, you know, if they get what they're asking for, I would have no way to deal with my power bills, that it would no longer be economically feasible for me to add solar and have some control over my my power bill myself. And it's also, the solar industry has really been a bright spot in Eastern Kentucky for employment for people. I know as Representative Hatton mentioned, you know, there are 4 or 5 businesses and organizations in Letcher County alone that have added solar, rooftop solar, and, you know, are able now to keep their doors open. You know, I think some of them are here and talk about that's the difference between shutting down and staying open. And that would not be possible if Kentucky Power gets their wishes here. So, you know, as other people have said, I've written a letter that had more stuff, but, you know, we are the poorest region in Kentucky and also in one of the poorest in the whole country. And it's just unthinkable. And we're in the midst of a pandemic and people have lost their jobs. And it's unthinkable that, you know, folks would be asked to pay more for their power. And like Representative Hatton has said, I've gone to hearings and I've heard people talk about the $900 power bills, you know, widow women living in a trailer and you know, really giving up food so they can pay that bill. So it just seems to me, you know, it's got to be part of the decision making here, that, you know, the affordability and, you know, the reality of this region has to be taken into consideration, and the lives of the folks here. So I will, that's all I want to say. The rate they're proposing is way too high, and trying to, you know, destroying the solar industry for the ability for those of us in the region to really make use of that just makes no sense to me. So thank you for this opportunity, and for folks here in the region and around Kentucky to speak with you all.
If I could ask you, Ms. Pickering, if you could give us your name and address for the record. I forgot to ask you that before you started to speak. I apologize.
Sure. It's Amelia Pickering, and it's 14 Church Street, Whitesburg, Kentucky 41858.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Gail Chandler.
That would be me. I'm also known as Elizabeth. My name is E. Gail Chandler, and I live at 935 Trout Lane, Shelbyville, 40065. While I live in Shelbyville, I grew up in eastern Kentucky, have many contacts there, and lived and worked in Floyd and Magoffin counties as an adult. I'm not anti-utility. My father worked for an electric cooperative. My great-grandfather died of lung cancer. I also have solar panels, net meter, and see this case as setting a precedent for the PSC. I would like to speak briefly about my purchase of solar panels and what it would have meant had I lived under the proposed Kentucky Power rate change. We are on a fixed income and bought the panels to protect our income from inflation. I received a 30% tax rebate on the purchase, which were gradually installed between 2014 and 2016, as we could not afford to do them all at once. I have 57 panels. I pay 10.5 cents per kilowatt and get reimbursed at the same rate. I pay a connection fee of $15 and some other fees, which total about $17.50. Based on our current usage, we will pay off our investment in about 15 years from the installation date, or when I am about 88. Now, under Kentucky Power's proposal, I would get 3.5 cents and pay 12 cents per kilowatt. This would give me 1.5 cents to pay off my panels. But to make it simple, let's forget the raise. Let's forget the time of day mumbo jumbo that only makes it worse. Let's just go from 10.5 cents credit to 3.5. That would make my payoff 3 times longer, or 45 years. I would be 118 if I still had my tax credit, which would extend it 4 more years to 60 years. Even if the time of day charges weren't included. And solar panels only last about 25 years. No one can tell me this is fair, just, and reasonable. I'm grandfathered in, but in the future, the only people who will buy solar panels under these conditions will be those who can afford batteries and disconnect, or those who are so rich and so environmentally concerned that they don't care about money. The power rate is guaranteed to kill our growing solar industry and discourage any solar interested company from coming into eastern Kentucky or later anywhere in Kentucky. I understand that there are only 44 homes in this district that have solar. Seems to me that Kentucky Power is beating a gnat to death with a sledgehammer. And as far as the 12-cent rate increase is concerned, we have loaned enough money to people in eastern Kentucky who live in trailers to know that this rate increase would be devastating, especially at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. I believe Representative Fugit is now on, if he would like to give some comments.
Rock Branch, Spencer Road, Chavies, Kentucky. And I'm live in Perry County, and I just would like to thank the commission for allowing me on the phone call tonight. Of course, it was good to hear from Representative Hatton and Senator Wigler earlier. I've served as a state representative of the 84th District since 2016, and I cover Perry County and half of Harlan County. But I'm also a pastor of Gospel Light Baptist Church for the past almost 9 years. As I said earlier, I'm a customer of Kentucky Power, and to be honest with you, I'm really surprised at the point that we are in time right now with all the hardships going on, not just in East Kentucky, but all across the nation, that Kentucky Power would put in for a rate increase at this time. There's a lot of people that's working hard to improve our district, and we've seen some progress, but this is a bad time, I think, for AEP and Kentucky Power to ask for this rate increase, not just because of COVID, but prior to the COVID time, we had a high unemployment rate. One of the first things I saw on the wall of one of the rooms at the Capitol was a large poster board. And on that poster board, it showed a picture of the entire state, and it had it shaded in different shades of blue, with darker blue being the worst. And as I looked at that, I saw that Southeast Kentucky is number one in poverty rate, number one in unemployment, number one in all the bad categories. We're number one. And because of the COVID increase, that has done nothing but increase all those things that I'm naming. What I would like to do, I would say that this increase is bad for the elderly. I have, like I said, I pastor Gospel Light Baptist Church, and I have elderly people in my church that they are on a fixed income of $652 a month, and they're they're just not able to pay their electric bill right now, but especially being on the fixed income. It would be bad for the elderly. It would be bad for the unemployed. It would be bad for small businesses. It would be bad. The increase would be bad because of county and city government increases. It would be bad on newly established or establishing businesses in our area. And I believe that it's just not fair at this time for an increase to take place. Now, again, this is not an attack on Kentucky Power. I have friends that work for Kentucky Power, been friends with them a long time, and I appreciate their community involvement. But there's no way, as a state representative of the 84th District, that I represent 44,000 people, and I couldn't just sit back and watch the power company receive an increase without saying something against this increase. And so what I'd like to ask the commission to do, because of the law saying fair and balanced and a reasonable increase, I think that during the time that we're in, that this is not fair, reasonable, it's not balanced. I don't think it's good for our community. And so I would at least like to ask the Public Service Commission to put the hearing off for at least 1 year, or until we get somewhat back on our feet and can see what our economy is going to do, see what our unemployment issues are going to do. And so I thank you again for your time, and I will just ask that you take my comments in consideration and reject any type of increase for this power company.
Thank you, Representative. Freddie Coleman. I think if you're on a phone and you're on mute, star 6.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Freddie Coleman. I live in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and I'm a retired coal mine electrician. Okay, I first want to ask I have a question for the Public Service Commission. Is the Kentucky Power Company retail customers the only ones paying to maintain Kentucky's power transmission and electrical system? Kentucky Power receives other income not shown here from co-ops and from electricity sold under contracts. And my question, and are the co-ops and the customers under contract paying their fair share to maintain Kentucky Power Company's generating plants and electrical system? And I asked the Public Service Commission to order that all people receiving electricity from Kentucky Power Company pay their fair share of the expense to maintain Kentucky Power's electrical systems. This will make the burden lighter on all retail customers. And also, ask the Kentucky Public Service Commission to order all rooftop solar customers to pay their fair share of expenses to maintain Kentucky Power electrical system because, number one, rooftop solars are designed to work with the electrical grid. Okay, number two, on days when the solar system, the rooftop solar system is not working well or tore up, or on bad days when it's not generating any electricity at all, they're going to have to buy electricity to stay warm. Okay, number three, a lot of companies selling rooftop solars want to make Kentucky Power Grid a storage place for rooftop solar customers in order to sell more solar systems. We've got to look at the whole Kentucky Power electrical system for all the customers, the poor customers that will never be able to own a solar system. And number four, by PJ&M rules, Kentucky Power has to generate enough electricity for all its customers plus 15% more over capacity. Rooftop solar is not helping Kentucky Power at all. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just telling the truth right here. It is unfair for Kentucky Power customers on fixed income and the poor for rooftop solar customers to get a free pass by not paying their share of expenses. Rooftop solar customers will get their reward with cheaper power bills. Okay, I also asked the Kentucky Public Service Commission to deny the tariffs RS, GS, LGS tariffs for electrical vehicles. Okay, and because number one, electrical cars is a personal matter, a personal item. Number two, we do not have tariffs for gasoline automobiles. And number three, Kentucky Power customers are overloaded with tariffs and debt already. We do not need to subsidize battery cars. Okay, now, I asked the Public Service Commission to deny Kentucky Power's request to replace the AMR meters with the AMI meter at a cost of $36+ million. And because, first reason, the Kentucky Power customers are already overloaded with debt, and customers' base is declining. People are leaving this area to find work, and people are dying, and their population is decreasing. And number two, a lot of Kentucky Power Company employees will lose their jobs. Number three, my AMR meter is working fine and is very efficient. Number four, it would be cheaper to replace the meters. I also asked the Public Service Commission to deny any carbon tax we put on the people of Eastern Kentucky because they cannot afford no more tariffs. I asked the Public Service Commission to only allow a rate case every 5 years by Kentucky Power or any other utility because it will be cheaper. It will save the Kentucky ratepayers and customers a lot of money. I asked the PFC to deny any solar farm to be built by Kentucky Power because the solar farm is just part-time electricity and it generates nothing at night. And it would be just wasting their money. And there's better alternatives like converting Unit 2 at Louisa over to natural gas. Over the last 3 years, I have received 6.4% cost of living increase in my Social Security. Medicare and supplementary health insurance has took all of my increase over the past 3 years. I've had no increase in income over 3 years. Oh, and the rate increase is excessive. That Kentucky Power is excessive and not fair to Kentucky Power Company customers. Where will this end? We've got to get a better system, and Kentucky Power's got to start managing better. And Kentucky Power manages to keep their rate of return coming in higher. They want to keep us in debt to keep their rate of return up high. And that's about all I got to say. They need to be fair with the Kentucky Power Company customers. That's all I have to say, and I thank you for your time, and that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Eve Polly?
Hello. My name is Eve Polly, and my address is 633 Rawlings Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40217. Thank you very much for holding these meetings. Though I'm not a Kentucky Power customer, I live in the LG&E zone, I know that the decisions made here today will set a precedent for rates and policies that'll end up affecting people throughout the rest of the state. I also have, good friends from Eastern Kentucky who I'm particularly concerned about being affected by the rate increases here. But following this, a lot of my comments will have to do with the rooftop solar portion. And it also occurs to me as I'm listening here to the discussion that it seems that a lot of disparate issues are really being kind of maybe lumped together when, at least so far, people are arguing that, the rate increase overall is too much and unjust, but we may have, differences in the way that we approach it. So in 2019, SB 100 turned the decision-making power from the state legislature to this body to decide the value of rooftop solar, via the net metering process rates and all of these other related policies as well. And I'm here to just urge you to sort of take this decision. I know that you take it seriously as members of this body, but to take it in sort of a broad way. And first and foremost, to refrain from implementing these and really related changes until we have a way to establish independently what the real, we talk all the time in these discussions about what the costs are to the utilities, but also what the benefits are overall of rooftop solar to the community and to everyone in the society, really. And I think that all of this is in alignment with the PSC's mission to foster the provision of a safe and reliable service at a reasonable price, right? That I think really being emphasized here today by everyone. My first point is related to, this pandemic that we're all living through right now, and its, biological consequences, its social consequences, and the economic consequences that are just devastating for so many people right now. And it's just really not the time to raise rates. Even myself as a person who, I'm an adjunct university instructor and in a sense have access to a lot of resources, but a very low income, had difficulty paying utility bills in the middle of the summer when I had a brief gap in income. And, luckily through my connections with the university, I was able to get some assistance through that period, but these sorts of resources just aren't available to everyone. And this is on top of, being very frugal as I can be with my energy usage. And just sort of an aside there, this declining block rate portion of what's being proposed here, I think really, it's like it's like cleaning up a wound and then pretending that the wound isn't there. Trying to, and I do understand, trying to help some of these households that have the very, very high energy bills because of, lack of insulation or old heating systems. But to do it in that way, I think will not ultimately, solve the problem, although immediately those people's bills do need to be helped. But under non-pandemic circumstances, I, like many people, would have been able to get through a brief gap in income without asking for help. I've worked in restaurants, I do substitute teaching, all these other things, but myself, like so many people, were unable to do whatever it is we do to get through those times when there's less income. So basically, in summation of that point, it's just really sort of one of the worst times imaginable and one of the worst places imaginable to do this kind of increase right now. With regards to the issue of rooftop solar, really, I think incentivizing, not de-incentivizing solar and other renewable energy is the right thing to do for everyone in Kentucky. I think that Ms. Gail Chandler in this discussion summarized very well the way that this 3.7 cents per kilowatt hour is insufficient for people who may want to take advantage of this, and also that the time of use policy works against that as well. And so kind of returning to the PSC's mission of providing reliable service, I urge you to think about reliable energy for Kentuckians in the long term. Are we better off with a small number of utilities creating energy in just a few variety of ways, or with lots of people producing energy in lots of different ways, and ultimately this variety of producing reliability in our systems in the very long term. And following this, I also think that it's important to note from a consumer standpoint, the element of choice that rooftop solar provides. Utility companies in this economy operate really with, a near sort of monopoly power. And that's only held in check, by regulatory bodies such as this one. And I think that implementing these changes will make, that sort of choice really unrealistic. And so just reducing the choices in a system where most of us only have one place to get our energy from. So I'd like to also just echo all of the comments on affordability, especially those of Representative Hatton, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pauley. Travis Bowling,
Hello, can you hear me?
we can.
All right, thank you guys for letting me in on this meeting. My name is Travis Bowling. I live at 3970 Highway 15 South in Jackson, Kentucky. I am a husband of an educator, a father of 2 grade schoolers, and I'm an engineering manager for a Class 1 railroad company here in Eastern Kentucky, whose name I will not say. We are originally from Jackson. We moved to Ohio in 2015, and we just moved back to Jackson and to a home on Kentucky Power's service area. That service area of Kentucky Power consists of 20 Eastern Kentucky counties, as everybody here knows, almost all of which are economically distressed, according to studies by the Appalachian Regional Commission. Annual household incomes here are far lower in Eastern Kentucky than the rest of the state and the nation, for that matter. Even working families here make much less. When we moved to Ohio 5 years ago in 2015, part of my relocation package was cost of living adjustments for several years after the reload. And the cost of living analysis determined we didn't get a cost of living increase when we moved to the Cincinnati area. And I thought that was absurd because I was told all my life the cost of living in Eastern Kentucky is cheap. And since moving back, we just moved back 3 months ago. I see why it really is much more expensive to live in Eastern Kentucky on several fronts. Payroll taxes took $100 extra out of my paycheck when I moved back to Kentucky state payroll taxes. Auto insurance in my county, in Breathitt County, went from $800 a year in Ohio to $2,300 a year for the exact same policy here, the cheapest I could find it. Homeowners insurance is higher, groceries are a lot higher, and there's annual auto taxes here, which we didn't pay in Ohio. So, full disclosure about the folks of Eastern Kentucky and Kentucky Power, they do offer low-income assistance programs, and there's other government programs to help the low-income folks of Eastern Kentucky. But the existence of these programs should not be a green light for price increases. Families like mine who don't qualify for assistance are made poorer when assistance programs are used as leverage to justify price hikes. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Kentucky power bills doubled between 2004 and 2016. I took my most recent Kentucky Power bill. I got my first full month just a few days ago, and I divided that total amount due by the kilowatt hours, because all I really want to know is the real rate figure. I know there's about 10 or 12 different fees that aren't really part of the rate or whatever, but that figure was 13.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, my last bill in Dayton, Ohio, from Dayton Power and Light Company, only 3 months ago, that same calculation, it was 9.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, I have a brother that lives in Moorhead, Kentucky, and his power company is Fleming Mason Electric Cooperative. I just looked at his current bill right now that he hasn't paid yet, and the effective rate on it is 9.9 cents per kilowatt hour. In other words, Kentucky Power is already 40% higher than those two electric companies that I'm familiar with. Now, Kentucky Power, if you look at their at their annual reports and their quarterly reports, they gave their employees generous raises in 18 and 19. They achieved nearly zero effective income tax rate in 2019. And they're currently due to receive over a 20% tax refund for the first 3 quarters of this year. Kentucky Power also benefited $18 million from Kentucky state tax law changes in 2018. So, as you know, Kentucky Power is one of many wholly owned subsidiaries of AEP. So we treat them like they're, just their own little company, but really they're part of a larger conglomerate. And Kentucky Power customers are only about 4% of AEP's total customer base. And we all know that AEP is an investor-owned for-profit utility company. Now, let's look at AEP. They paid out $1.35 billion in dividends to stockholders in 2019. That's billion with a B. They have already paid over $1 billion in dividends to stockholders this year, and the year of the plague. And now they have now paid dividends for 442 consecutive quarters to stockholders without fail. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you look on page 26 of AEP's fourth quarter 2019 earnings release presentation, AEP published a chart showing how much money AEP companies realized from rate hikes. The total was $210 million that year that they realized from rate hikes. At the bottom it says impact on EPS, 34 cents, with a green arrow pointing upward. EPS is an acronym for earnings per share. In other words, AEP was saying to its stockholders in their earnings release presentation, look here how much money we put back in your pockets by raising electric rates on our customers. And right here, this is the image. See the up arrow, that's 34 cents. It's directly from their own shareholder documents, their annual reports. So in summary, AEP is asking you, the Kentucky Public Service Commission, to authorize a rate hike, considerable rate hike, on customers in the poorest region of Kentucky. 10 of 20 counties served by Kentucky Power make the 100 poorest counties in the United States list and have poverty rates as high as 3 times the national average. Kentucky Power and AEP are doing great financially according to their very own financial reports to stockholders. They haven't missed a step in continuing to pay dividend payments to their stockholders even during this pandemic. Now, we talked about they are guaranteed a reasonable rate of return. But when a company is guaranteed a reasonable rate of return, what's their incentive to be efficient in their operations? Every other company I know of in America, and every other household for that matter, right now is cutting internally. People are losing their jobs or laying people off temporarily. They're cutting benefits, and they're just generally looking for ways to save money and make their operation more efficient. But power companies in Kentucky don't have to do that because of this law. So poor and middle class Eastern Kentucky households already live in economic distress. We see more economic pain ahead, and we are the least capable of dealing with a rate increase. So what's the 10-year outlook? Well, if you assume a 16% rate increase and assume a very conservative monthly usage of 1,388 kilowatt hours per month, in 10 years, I will have paid Kentucky Power, AEP, and their stockholders nearly $8,000 more than my brother would or will in Moorhead, Kentucky for the exact same amount of electricity. That's $8,000 over 10 years. In the poorest region of the state, more. So the 10-year outlook for the Bowling Children's College Fund for the next 10 years is most likely zero. And while at that same time, the outlook for AEP stockholders is $13 billion with a B. So on behalf of Eastern Kentucky, I respectfully ask the Public Service Commission to consider the ratepayers of Eastern Kentucky and say no to Kentucky Power's rate increase and ask AEP to find cost-cutting measures internally. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. Henry Jackson?
Here I am. I'm tuning in now. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Just give me 1 second here. Camera.
And now we
Hello,
can
my
see
name is
you.
Henry. Yes, ma'am. Hello, my name is Henry Jackson. I live at 1000 Rain Court, Lexington, 40515. I also am not a KPC customer, but believe this ruling will likely set a precedent for other state net metering applications. I respectfully disagree with the avoided cost calculation and the proposed net metering changes for 3 reasons. First, as stated in my written comments, I think there are a wide variety of other factors that ought to be considered in the calculation of comprehensive cost-benefit analysis. Second, the method of the avoided cost calculation doesn't justify the stated reason for the application, that net customers are being unfairly subsidized by other ratepayers. The share of net metering as a part of sold KPC electricity is minuscule, as well as for the foreseeable future. As a practical matter, if you were to increase the current KPC total solar transmission by a factor of, say, 10 times more solar power, it would still be well below the 1% of KPC peak load capacity. The third reason I disagree is because the calculation is based solely on the current KPC business model. Given the steady decline of the coal industry and increasingly warmer Kentucky winters and related declining sales, it would make sense to at least examine a transition to a new energy business model. The key word here being transition, which is to say, to not immediately drop fossil fuels, but to instead examine the possibilities of making profitable venture in the development, maintenance, and management of distributed energy, and to examine such possibilities prior to further consideration of this application. Please see my written comments for more information, as well as an excellent op-ed on this topic in today's New York Times. The proposed 67% cut in the net metering price will cripple the financial incentive of growing and competitive solar industry due, presumably, to similar future commission rulings in other areas of the state. As an example, a net $10,000 home insulation cost, financed with a 3% loan, would require a $150 per month savings to reach a break-even point in about 6 years. The proposed KPC price cut would more than double the payback period, and even more so when you subtract the federal tax credit, which will expire 2 years from now. If PSC jurisdictions are made uncompetitive in net solar energy, despite prevailing market demand, The only places I see left in Kentucky for solar net metering would be non-PSC utilities, such as municipally owned power service areas. That effect would balkanize the state as to where one might access net solar power, putting PSC utility communities at a competitive disadvantage in attracting economic development and growth, not to mention forestalling major opportunity for economic activity and continued creation of new high-paying jobs, as documented also in my written comments. Sorry, I lost my place. I urge the Commission to take comprehensive cost-benefit analysis described here. Lastly, I recognize that responding to these changing market conditions is tough medicine for the heart of coal country. On the other hand, we're better to explore the possibilities than an area of the state that testimony here and in other hearings has described as economically struggling and would welcome an economic stimulus and the multiplier effects on related industries. Thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Alice Melendez? Yes, we can.
Hi, sorry, I'm unmuted now. Okay, so I'm speaking, Alice Melendez, 541 Vine Street, Paris, Kentucky, 40361. And while I don't live in this area, my old man's mother is a Kentucky Power customer, and I wanted to speak to her situation. So I'm talking both as an advocate of increasing incentives to adopt distributed solar power everywhere, and as somebody with kin who's directly affected by the proposed changes. Globally, distributed solar is recognized as a means to decrease carbon emissions and dependence on fossil fuels. And I just want to say, there's a real reason to save some of the fossil fuels for people 7 generations down the road when we may have better ways to mitigate global heating impacts. And I know that when people are in a crunch time and feeling the sort of immediate pain of the pandemic and the recession and the decades of disinvestment and economic slow collapse of Eastern Kentucky, it feels hard to think about the future. But if people in the past had thought about our future, it may have helped us now. But talking about Lisa Kennard, her house was destroyed by the tornado in West Liberty. And this proposal is absolutely disastrous for her, and I think it's a really good example. She was blessed to be rehoused in a new, really efficient home that was built by Habitat for Humanity, and it included a solar installation. She works as a pharmacy tech, which doesn't pay as well as the title might make somebody think. She uses less power than her home produces every month and is pushing power onto the grid with a carbon footprint, like including the carbon emissions embodied in the production of the solar panels themselves. Your carbon footprint per unit power, which is decreasing the longer that they're in service. She works a day and she's at home at night that's when she's using her temperature control, her entertainment center, and her lighting. This proposal hits her as hard as any rate structure that any person could imagine if they were trying to pinch her very limited income because of these day and night blocks. I want to advocate that you reject Kentucky Power's basic argument that people who can afford to buy solar panels are shifting costs off on lower income people who don't. There's nonprofits who serve needy people across Kentucky Power service areas who are using solar to get their crazy high utility bills under control and free up money to do their critical work at a time of so many critical needs in the region. Meanwhile, independent-minded people who own their own homes, sometimes their family homes, which have been passed down, can invest in home solar systems to decrease their monthly bills so they can survive with irregular work in sectors like home repair or farming, or as self-employed people with small businesses getting by in a recession and a pandemic. And like I said, I'm in Paris, Kentucky. I'm in a municipally owned power company. My bills are manageable. I run a home repair business. Business is kind of slow, but my house is paid off, and it makes it possible for me to be in a sturdy place. And solar panels can help people like me do that. So trying to paint solar advocates as like rich folks who are pushing their costs onto poor regular people who just buy what Kentucky Power produces and sends them is disingenuous, especially considering what Travis Bowling was telling us about their financial picture, AEP's internal messaging, and their relative total charges per kilowatt hour compared to other power companies. And I heartily second the message of Representative Hatton that utilities expenses must be audited. Kentucky Power's proposal would raise the average power bill by more than $20 a month, with the bulk of the increase in the base charge. Now is not the time to raise rates, period. Lenders pay back shareholder dividends, inflated expenses would have to take a temporary backseat, or maybe a long-term backseat, to the basic needs of Kentuckians struggling to find income in a major recession. But also, it seems like they're trying to blame distributed solar for the need to increase rates, to act like propaganda so some people can blame their hardship on like those solar people and not put the blame where it belongs, on the shoulders of the executives making decisions that make themselves rich while not protecting workers and ratepayers. And it's obvious they're trying to use it as a test case to see how the commission will respond, since SB 100 passed last year. Fewer than 50 people in the territory are using grid-tied solar, and research from across the country shows that at this low rate of home solar power generation, the impact on the distribution costs of utilities is practically imperceptible. So putting, their messaging is false. And then putting more of the increase on the base charge and less on the per kilowatt charge punishes people who make efforts to use less power, which can't be squared up with the message that they're trying to change net metering rates to protect like the bulk of ratepayers. Reward people for making changes in their homes that allow them to use less power. This is what's needed to adjust our economy and infrastructure to new realities. Put the heat on investor-owned corporate utilities to be efficient and cut costs, rather than raising rates on customers of their monopoly investors' dream business. Make a stable investment environment for distributed solar so people can foresee their payback period, and make solar a viable option for medium-term home improvement investment which pays for itself in savings. Recognize how this case will influence future solar rate cases in the Commonwealth, because this is what's needed to adjust our economy and our infrastructure to new realities. At some point, considering the climate impact of generation sources has to become part of deciding what is fair, just, and reasonable. And meanwhile, no rate increase at all is fair, just, and reasonable at this particular time. And don't feel bad, Representative Hatton. My kids tell me, okay, boomer, as well, and I'm only 36 years old. So the youngins, they're confused, and they're lucky to have people showing up at Zoom meetings to advocate for their futures. But yeah.
Thank you. Gwen Johnson.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on the call tonight. I'm Gwen Johnson. I live at 2738 Highway 317 in Jackhorn, Kentucky. 41825 is my address. I just wanted to talk to you about, there have been some really great comments, and I've appreciated every one. But I'm sitting in the bakery here at Black Sheep Bakery at Hemphill Community Center. Black Sheep Bakery is a social enterprise, and we provide second chance employment to people coming out of incarceration, and working with the Letcher County Drug Court, because we're in Letcher County. So for years here, about 25 to be exact. In this old Hemphill grade school building, we have had the major drain on our finances and our fundraising has always been the electric bill. So last year we rallied with some other organizations in Letcher County to get solar panels on top of our building to help us do away with some of that tremendous cost. Before the solar panels, it was nothing for our electric bill to be more than $2,000 a month in the wintertime. And since the solar panels we had to borrow the money for the solar panels, and so we're making a payment, and plus, you know, then we're getting a little bit of net metering when the weather is sunny, and it's probably cut our electrical cost about a third of what we were paying. So we're thankful for that. But we're sitting right smack in the middle of a coal camp community. Our community was made to house miners. And to say that coal country doesn't want solar is incorrect. We didn't want to make the coal miners mad because they've always been the benevolent ones around our organization. They were the ones who had resources and periodically would come and say, hey, we heard you were needing this piece of equipment and we'd like to purchase it for you. And they had always helped us out. So before we put the solar panels on top of the building, we decided that we would do a survey with the coal miners in our community to find out what their feelings would be about us getting solar on top of this building that we're in. The building was built in 1944, and it was built for a coal furnace. But over the years, the coal furnace fell into disrepair and was so obsolete that we couldn't get parts for it. So then we had put in heat pumps, and then the electric bill soared. The coal it took to fire the furnace was much cheaper than the electricity to run the heat pumps. And I never could understand how that could be so or why that should be so. But anyway, we did a survey with the coal miners, and in talking to the coal miners, they all said something like this: well, honey, the gravy train has pulled out, and we got to find a new way. And if I could get those things on top of my house, I would get them because we're having a hard time paying our electric bill. And so we went ahead and got the panels on top of here. As well, in our community, excuse me, most of our folks are on fixed incomes that are living here. Most of them are retired. There's a few of us working, but not a lot. And they struggle, just as has been said over and over on here, to pay their bills. We're living in one of the poorest places in America. That's already been said. A friend of mine came by here after we started up the bakery, and we try to make the best things that we can get our hands on. We try to make those into bread, because I feel like that we have had a long time of having, some not so good bread choices around. And so he came by here and he said, hey, Gwen, do you realize that you're trying to sell rich people's bread to the poorest people in America? And so we stopped making such lavish bread and started making a simpler bread. And so I would like to propose that Kentucky Power stop living so lavishly and start serving the people that are in their constituency who are struggling, and make it something that is viable for all. when we pay our electric bills, the riders and things that are attached, you know, a lot of times I wonder, are they trying to run us out of here? Are they trying to make us leave the place we love because we can't afford to live here? A gentleman who was talking about moving here from Ohio, I mean, that's atrocious that you don't have to pay that kind of bills in other places. And then a place in such a struggle, having this kind of thing levied on it. I think it's a shame. It's nothing less. I just can't even, I can't even figure out why they would even be proposing yet another rate hike. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of my community, on behalf of the people I love, on the behalf of fledgling businesses just trying to survive in a pandemic, and we're trying to provide jobs here for those who might have a hard time finding a job otherwise. And if we have to shut this place down, I don't know what we'll do in this community, because we've had a little bit of hope as we've been rolling along here. And then this pandemic has hit us, and it's kind of took the wind out of our sails. So I just ask this Public Service Commission, don't knock the wind out of our sails yet again. I mean, we're hit hard enough as it is. And thank you so much. I appreciate getting to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Chad Conway?
Chad Conway, 180 Mac and Nellie Branch Road, Hazard, Kentucky. Just wanted to take a minute. I've heard a lot of folks talk, and I appreciate everybody being on here. I thank the Public Service Commission for their time as well. But Eastern Kentucky in the Kentucky Power service area has seen great increases from 2004 through 2016 that just devastated Eastern Kentucky. And I know the Public Service Commission sitting there today may not have been part of this, but we saw rate increases astronomically. And what Mr. Bowling said earlier, these rate increases, they went at it at a different approach and got approved for some of these surcharges and underwriters through the Public Service Commission for several years. We're paying astronomical rates already. We have seen these small businesses in my community that's trying to start up, nonprofits that have started up, and we've seen these people struggle during this pandemic, and it's unbelievable that we're sitting here tonight with them asking for a 16% rate increase. They are making American Electric Power Company, the parent company of Kentucky Power. Last year in 2019, the chairman made $14 million in compensation, $3.6 million in bonuses. The executive vice chair made $2.6 million in compensation with $800,000 in bonuses. The chief financial officer made $6 million in compensation with bonuses of $1.8 million. Executive vice president of utilities with Kentucky Power and American Electric Power made $4.7 million with $825,000 in bonuses. We're looking at over $5 million in bonuses alone from the American Electric Power, which is the Kentucky Power Company. So it's just mind-boggling that we're dealing with a pandemic and we're sitting here and they're asking for a 16% rate increase when we have small businesses that are struggling and trying to start up. My partner runs a small nonprofit here in Eastern Kentucky that just got on its feet during this pandemic, and a rate increase of this will shut his doors and many other small businesses' doors that are really trying to start up here in Eastern Kentucky. There's no way that they can sustain. I have family members that are on the fixed income, like Representative Fugit said, of $650 a month. And a rate increase like this will make them have to decide, which they already are deciding, whether to buy food or to pay their electric bill. These executives have made millions, and it's just basically greed that we're seeing, asking for a rate increase of 16%. We have people that have broke their backs mining coal in eastern Kentucky to make them the multi-billion-dollar company they are today. And unfortunately, that greed is still showing up today, asking for another 16% rate increase. I reject any type of rate increase on the people of eastern Kentucky by Kentucky Power Company. I just ask that you take this in consideration, that we cannot withstand any more types of rate increases like this, and these companies are already making billions of dollars in profits. Thank you for your time. I'll give my time to others that are waiting to speak tonight. It's unfortunate that we are not allowed to have a public hearing in person, because many people that are disabled cannot communicate, don't have the services available to communicate on this type of media. And I think if this ever comes up again, that it should only be considered in public hearing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Pamela Brashear.
Yes, my name is Pamela Brashear. I am from 5193 Left Fork, Maces Creek Road in Viper, Kentucky, 41774. I'm getting a real education tonight. I didn't expect to learn so much by being on this meeting, but most of what I was going to comment on has already been said, but I will say that my husband's and my income have been cut by half since we retired, so I went back to work as a school bus driver to deliver meals to students while schools are closed. And my husband was working for the Census Bureau, but that job ended. And if Kentucky Power gets this rate hike, our electric bill will go up by approximately $300 a year. $300 I could spend on gas to travel 33 miles a day to get to the food van that I drive 3 days a week. $300 that we could spend on groceries, the price for which seems to go up daily. $300 that I could put against property taxes that are more than double that amount. $300 that we could use for deductibles and co-pays and medicines, and I could use to pay garbage and water bill and many other bills I'm sure all of you have. It's not every bill we have, of course, but you get the idea. I also have a problem with, uh-oh, I lost you. There you are. I have a problem with this having to pay for the closure. Oh my goodness, what is that doing? Hang on. Having to pay for the closure of the Big Sandy coal-fired plant. The last time they asked for a rate hike, that was their excuse. They needed to pay off that coal-fired plant that they had to close. I don't know why we have to pay for that. When they're saving money by using natural gas, I don't know why they can't use the savings from that to pay for that coal-fired plant, but it's not their customers' fault that they had that plant. And now they want us to pay for new smart meters. I'm content with dumb meters that a person could go out and read like they used to do. That would be a job for an out-of-work coal miner, actually. And as far as solar power, we are meeting with someone Wednesday about getting solar panels on our roof, our 23-year-old roof, which they would have to give us a new roof first and then install the panels. I'm not sure after listening to other people tonight if it's cost effective or not. I'd have to get it done before January 1st, apparently, before the metering kicks in. They want a rate hike in. They want to want us to give them energy for free if we choose to go with solar panels. I have a problem with that. Now, there are people in this area a lot worse off than my husband and me. I've noticed on my meal delivery route that there are people living in tool sheds now. I'm sure it's not a thing that everybody wants to do. 2 miles from me, there's 3 people living in a tool shed with no electricity because they can't afford it. And they're using propane heaters, and they're using wood stoves, and they have grills in their yards for cooking, and propane camping stoves. Sad. It's very sad. And in addition to that, there's so many people that need the meals we're delivering. I see kids tickled to death to get these cold meals, sometimes hot if we get there in time. And around here, if you don't have a job in health care or education, you're really hurting. And right now, jobs and education are up in the air. I'm a substitute driver, so if I don't drive, I don't get paid. So this is really a bad time for Kentucky Power to ask for another rate hike. Seems like we just had one. So I'm begging you to deny this rate hike. It will depress an already deeply depressed area. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Brashear. Kate Shanks.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good evening. I'm Kate Shanks. I'm Vice President of Public Affairs for the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. We are located at 464 Chenault Drive, Frankfort, Kentucky. And thank you for the opportunity to provide comments tonight on the case involving Kentucky Power's changes to the net metering tariff. The Chamber is the largest business association in the state, representing the needs of thousands of members across the Commonwealth. And tonight, I speak in support of Kentucky Power's proposal to change its net metering tariff. The Chamber supported Senate Bill 100, which passed during the 2019 legislative session. The Chamber's interest in passing the bill and speaking here this evening is based on our commitment to protect Kentucky's affordable energy advantage. Kentucky's net metering statutes came about at a time when the price per kilowatt hour of solar was significantly higher than it is today. Solar PV is the primary technology used in a net metering arrangement. The original method to compensate net metering customers for excess electricity, a credit at the retail rate, created a cross-subsidization problem. But over time, as the price of solar panels and installation has fallen and more customers have adopted net metering and made use of the excess power credit, the cross-subsidization has grown. The current net metering tariff that utilizes retail rate allows a customer to avoid fixed costs of using the grid. The cost avoidance is especially troubling given that a net metering customer uses the grid more than a non-net metering customer. They rely on the utility services when they use electricity during non-solar hours and when they push electricity onto the grid during peak solar hours. There are costs to this usage, and today non-net metering customers are paying those costs. The cost shifting may be lower in Kentucky than in other states due to low penetration rates, but the problem will worsen over time. When the Chamber advocated for Senate Bill 100, it did not ask the legislature to abandon net metering. Net metering allows a customer to bank excess electricity without having to invest in expensive battery equipment. The ability to use the grid as a battery is a significant benefit in and of itself. To add another financial incentive through the use of the retail rate credit, which creates an additional cost shift, is not necessary. Advocates for net metering incentives will typically make a couple of arguments. One, they'll speak of the environmental benefits such systems provide, such as reducing carbon dioxide. It's important to note that utilities are under strict rules to reduce emissions of certain pollutants, and utilities, including Kentucky Power, have retooled their fleets and have reduced emissions, including CO2, considerably. They have specific means of recovering the costs of compliance under your review. Further, utilities utilize scale to achieve emission reductions, making changes at the power plant, such as improving the efficiency of a plant's unit, switching fuels, will have significant reductions in emissions. Customers benefit from the economies of scale utilities can achieve when using units, plants, or entire fleets to meet regulations. Second, you will hear advocates of net metering incentives speak about economic reasons and jobs created by expanding the solar industry. We certainly care about creating jobs and economic growth at the Chamber. But I think it's important to state that people invest in solar for various reasons. In some cases, it's to reduce their environmental footprint. In other cases, it may be to invest in the technology to one day live off the grid with battery backup. Some use solar as a hedge against possible higher electricity costs in the future. This proposed tariff change won't change those reasons. Kentuckians have invested in solar for years, even though the cost of producing a kilowatt hour from a rooftop solar array vastly exceeded the cost of utility-provided electricity across the Commonwealth. The Chamber does not oppose the use of renewable energy. We see some businesses pursue renewable energy, including electric utilities, and the Chamber will continue to be a resource for its members that are navigating these energy issues. An energy approach that meets the varying needs of businesses and can help them remain competitive while ensuring Kentucky maintains its affordable, reliable energy advantage is part of the Chamber's economic strategy. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this critical issue.
Thank you. Is Mr. Rosenberg on?
Yes, I am just going back to Canada.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. There's a little bit of feedback.
Okay. I don't know what else I can do about it. Hi, my name is John Rosenberg. I'm at 147 Clark Drive in Prestonsburg, Kentucky, 41653. I'm speaking this evening as the chair of our AARP Chapter B in Floyd County. It's actually the Big Sandy chapter. We've heard a lot of really comments that have been really impressive about the difficulty that this proposed rate increase would bring to low-income folks in Eastern Kentucky and indeed to many of our members. There are about 31,000 seniors in the Big Sandy region, and almost 5,000 are below the poverty line, which is about 1.5 times the rate in the rest of the state. Many of the folks are on fixed income, and utility costs are becoming a major item for them. With respect to their income, as you've already heard, and we're going to have to choose between paying the utility bill and paying for drugs. That's not the necessary costs. We've heard this evening, and we've heard it before, that somebody in the wintertime especially, bills can reach $500 to $1,000 a month. In fact, a few years ago, one of our homeless shelters at the time had to close because the average bill was over $1,000 a month. So we certainly oppose this proposed increase because of the devastating effects it has on our people in this region. And I think to make it worse, the notion that this increase would mean 16% compared to 10% for large non-residential customers makes it even worse. The AARP feels that it's much better to have charges based on regular base charges and that these other fixed charges should become prohibitive even before anybody turns their lights on. Right now, we have another proposal to raise those fixed charges by 25% for Kentucky Power. This charge has gone to the proposal from $14 to $17.50 a month. That's prohibitive. The AARP opposes these higher fixed charges and instead maybe the low customer charge that only covers metering and billing costs. We're also concerned about the single issue surcharges such as those proposed for the new smart meters. This proposed surcharge should be rejected. These charges should be paid at base rates and cover long-term operating costs. We also think that solar needs to be a viable option in providing energy, and that discouraging the use of solar with this proposal that's before you is counterproductive, and really sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, when in fact the rest of the country, the proposal for the administration is to look at alternative fuels in a significant way if climate change means anything. The nation of the good reasons to look for greater organization and use of alternative, and looking at alternative energy sources is certainly something that needs to be done. But you should evaluate those proposals. We're skeptical on because it's so easy to add additional costs. In creating what appears to be a new modern system. So hopefully you will look at this proposal skeptically and reject this proposal solely in terms of just the human toll that it's going to take in our area, which you've heard the folks this evening better than I could express, and that we will reject this proposal that's in front of you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Kara Cooper?
Good job. Put yourself on mute.
Hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give comment tonight. My name is Kara Cooper. I live at 907 Bryan Avenue in Lexington, 40505. I coordinate a network of solar advocate organizations across the state, and in my comment tonight, I'd like to highlight the fact that now is not the time for making precedent-setting changes to solar net metering policy. I trust that many of the interveners have spoken to the technical details of this topic, and we've heard lots of great comments tonight on the need to keep rates affordable. So I will stick to sharing some of my own personal experiences and observations. Now is not the time to make precedent-setting decisions when we don't even have all the facts. What we do know is that distributed solar does not cause meaningful cost shifting until it reaches levels that are much higher than they are in Kentucky. Certainly higher than the levels in Kentucky Power's service territory. We also know that Kentucky Power has provided no data to back up these claims. We know that rooftop solar helps our grid to be more resilient, helps utility companies meet their peak demand, and helps our communities create jobs, take control of their electricity bills, and protect the climate. We deserve to have those benefits measured and included in the compensation rate that's set. You, as the PSC, has the opportunity to rule not to make changes to solar net metering until an expert can collect the data and create a process for evaluating this policy in a way that is fair, just, and reasonable. On a personal note, over the past year and a half, I've had the honor to work on the Kentucky Solar Stories Project, where I've learned about dozens and dozens of solar projects across the state and met with homeowners, small businesses, nonprofits, farmers, and churches who've made the investment in rooftop solar. I've met farmers who've invested in solar because it helps them lower their cost and increase their self-reliance. Rural homeowners who see solar as an opportunity to be more self-sufficient and to plan for retirement. People on fixed incomes who use their solar to lock in their energy prices and stay within their budgets. Small businesses that are able to invest in solar to increase their operating budgets, hire more employees, and appeal to a growing customer base that demands sustainability. Churches who see investing in solar as a way to care for God's creation and do their part for the environment. and nonprofits who are providing essential services in our communities, like housing domestic violence survivors or creating community spaces with free internet access to students engaged in remote learning, to free up money in their limited budgets and stretch their grant funding further. When I think back to last year's administrative hearing on net metering, I'm reminded of the narrative that utility companies tried to paint of rooftop solar users. Wealthy, urban people who were taking advantage of low-income neighbors in order to have access to solar. But in my experience, this narrative is just not true. These are everyday Kentuckians taking their electricity bills into their own hands and doing what they can to stretch their money and protect their futures. These folks are job creators, helping our homegrown solar industry stay afloat, and without solar net metering, rooftop solar just doesn't make as much financial sense. You hear solar advocates and installers say that doing away with one-to-one net metering credit will destroy rooftop solar in Kentucky. It may sound hyperbolic, but it's not. Just look at Paducah. I met with someone in Paducah who helped raise money to put solar panels up at a domestic violence shelter for women and children, which is now saving them an average of $2,500 a year in operating costs. As soon as SB 100 passed, Paducah Gas and Electric, as a municipal utility not under the jurisdiction of the PSC, decided to do away with net metering in favor of avoided cost compensation. There have been 0 new installations in Paducah since that happened. These are the type of people who will be hurt by changing the net metering compensation rate before we reach the point of potentially causing cost shifting. People who are trying to lower their electricity bills, small businesses, and people who are trying to make a living in the solar industry. Monopoly utility investors are allowed a reasonable return on their investment. Shouldn't everyday Kentuckians who want to invest in their own solar be allowed the same? Additionally, if the PSC does rule to change net metering, there are many customers who are in the process of installing solar right now. It would be incredibly helpful for the PSC to put out an order that anyone with a net metering agreement submitted, either approved or pending, by the ruling date, be grandfathered in under the current net metering policy if the changes to the policy are approved. SB 100 gives you the opportunity to weigh the costs and benefits of solar net metering and propose a fair, just, and reasonable compensation rate. I would encourage you to rule not to make changes at this time because the current one-to-one compensation rate is fair, just, and reasonable in Kentucky. This is how the Arkansas Public Service Commission recently ruled. Until distributed solar really takes off in Kentucky and utility companies can back up their claims with real hard facts about cost shifting, this conversation is a waste of our time. It's a waste of your time when the Public Service Commission has so many important, timely issues to deal with. Ensuring a monopoly utility company can corner the solar market is just not one of them. Thank you, and that concludes my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Sarah Lynn Cunningham?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Lynn Cunningham, and I live at 2207 Lauderdale, like Fort Lauderdale in Florida, Road in Louisville, Kentucky, 40205. I am the executive director of the Louisville Climate Action Network, which currently consists of 39 nonprofit organizations, for-profit businesses, churches, educational institutions, etc., many of which are statewide. I should tell you that I am a licensed professional engineer, licensed in the state of Kentucky, and that I have spent most of my career working for or with utilities. And therefore, I look at this situation from the environmental standpoint, but also from the utility standpoint. And I wanted to respond to one thing that was said earlier that was factually incorrect before I get to my prepared remarks. I do have solar panels on my roof, and I'm trying to line this up. here is my most recent LG&E bill, and I don't think you can read it, so you'll have to believe me that I pay the same basic service charge, or what an engineer would call a meter fee, that every other customer pays. So I am absolutely paying my fair share of the overhead of my utility. It is not true that solar customers get off on that account. I don't know of any utility in Kentucky that doesn't impose that meter fee to all customers, solar or not. Okay, so now this is my prepared letter. We advocate, this is the Louisville Climate Action Network, we advocate for saner public policies and promote community action to reduce the growing threats of global climate change. Our toolbox is focused on energy efficiency and clean, renewable power, both of which create decent jobs with benefits that cannot be exported. In good faith, LCAN, as we call ourselves for short, participated in the net metering discussions of the 2017, 18, and 19 legislative sessions. Few solar advocates were allowed to speak at committee hearings. Still, our phone calls, email, and in-person meetings persuaded the majority of the 2017 and 18 legislature that the utilities bill was unfair and an unnecessary job killer. I think it is stunningly important to focus on the fact that during all three legislative sessions, the solar supporters consistently brought data and meta-analyses to show what cost, if any, solar customers impose upon the utilities that have net metering agreements with them. We were never allowed to present those studies. The utility monopolies never showed any evidence of any harms that solar customers are presenting to the utilities. So what happened, of course, is after the first two failures, the utilities donated, wink, $327,050 in campaign funds to the majority of the 2019 session legislators facing re-election, and in a matter of a couple of months, the 2019 session happened and they got their bill passed. It is legal in Kentucky for the utilities to give money to legislators standing for re-election, and it's legal for that to get them the attention and the favor, whatever you want to call it, to get their bill passed. I believe that it might even be legal, but it would not be kosher for the Public Service Commission to consider this rate proposal without requiring that utility to show in a transparent fashion a cost of service study analysis to justify punishing and providing perverse incentives against customer-owned solar power. That is, to me, the ethic of Public Service Commission proceedings is it's transparent, it's under oath. You don't get to stand up and just say stuff. You got to prove it. And so I beg you to please apply that rule and that policy to these monopolies and make them show you and us the true cost of net metering as well as the avoided cost. I will tell you, having worked for utilities, we know that power is cheap at night, and if we can offset operations from dayside shift or even the evening shift into the graveyard shift, we do it because we pay much less for power. The idea that we're being subsidized is bogus in the sense that we are giving power to the utilities in the daytime when power has the highest market value, and we are pulling from the grid at nighttime when the power has the least value. So if we want to talk about who's subsidizing whom, I submit to you the solar customers are subsidizing the utilities, not the other way around. The other thing that I think is super critical is that there is a long list of corporations in this country, most of whom we love to have come to our state, starting with Google and Apple and going down to many other names. They won't come to a state where their only choice is coal-fired power. They want solar power, and they want the right to put solar on their own big flat roofs to knock down their carbon footprint because they're doing environmental reporting to their investors and they know that this is a big deal. I could name companies in Louisville, but I'm not because that wouldn't be appropriate. But there are companies here in Louisville that are going solar so that their environmental accounting scores fare better. So I guess what I really want to stress is that the reason we have utilities, monopolies in our country is because it doesn't make sense to run two sets of power lines and have companies compete for residential customers. It makes sense to have only one utility. It makes sense not to ask ratepayers to have redundant stuff, redundant power lines or gas lines or whatever. So I get that. I think that's smart. But you know what? What goes with that privilege of being a monopoly is a responsibility to serve the public and to have, you don't get to act like a for-profit, free market company when you are a monopoly. You're supposed to be taking into account your impact on the community as a whole. And the folks who live in this service area did a hell of a job of explaining why this would be really wrong. So basically what I'm saying is, I urge you, I beg you to please not set a precedent by letting a utility waltz right in and make a bunch of claims with no facts and no data and no analysis, especially in an area that is hurting so badly in a time when the whole state is hurting badly. If you let them get away with that stuff, every other utility is going to do it too, and we're just setting ourselves up for a worse future. And beyond that, I think that's all I have to say, and I very much appreciate that you are staying late on a weeknight and listening to what everybody has to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is all of the names that I have that have signed up to speak. Again, if someone is on that would like to speak, they can go to our website and look at the directions on how to send an email to psc.meetings@ky.gov to get put on the list. We will be here until 9. If someone wants to sign up in that meantime, we'd be glad to hear your comments. Okay, we are back. We have another speaker that has signed up. Eric Evans.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? We're able to hear you, Mr. Evans. Go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Evans. We're trying to make sure you can hear us.
Okay, great. Okay, my name is Eric Evans, 6937 Woodhaven Place Drive, Louisville, Kentucky, 40228. I'm here on behalf of ARP and representing tens of thousands of members that we have in Eastern Kentucky. And I just wanted to echo largely what Mr. Rosenberg said and why we are opposed to these rate increases, why we don't think it's the appropriate time. I was moved by a panelist story who she talked about how folks are starting not even to be able to live in houses and they're living in sheds and things like that. Our founder, Ethel Percy Andrus, started ARP because she noticed that some of her retired teachers were actually living in chicken coops. So that's the reason AARP started. She thought there needed to be something to do that, and then here we are. It's AARP today. As John said, we just don't understand why there needs to be a 16% residential increase. It's too high. We believe it's unfair. It unfairly burdens, especially the residential customers, of course. We also know that you want us to install new smart meters. We question the time of this rollout. You want to recover smart meter costs and other grid modernization costs through a new rider surcharge, and AARP opposes single issue surcharges. The utility claims a $38 a month customer charge is justified, but the $14 a month charge is already too high. There's no reason to put that on the backs of your customers. They're already having a hard time deciding if they should pay for their utility bills, their medicines, or the food. And in some cases, rent. So also, we should oppose this proposal because, with higher usage, such a proposal could, it helps. People can't regulate how their usage are. Older customers that are oftentimes AARP members, they're low utilizers of electricity, and when you have a high customer charge on them, it just doesn't make sense. So I would largely like to, don't want to take any more of your time, largely echo how eloquently Mr. Rosenberg talked about the increases that we're opposed to, and we encourage the PSC to reject this increase, and we continue, and we'd also like to thank the PSC for giving us this time to testify. We're glad you had virtual hearings, and we hope you continue the public hearings like you used to when we can in the future. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Again, if anyone's on who would like an opportunity to speak, please send an email to psc.meeting@ky.gov, and we will be here until 9 o'clock. Okay, it is now 9 o'clock, and this public comment period, or public comment session, will be closed. Remember that tomorrow the hearing will be streamed live at psc.ky.gov, and at 9 o'clock public comment will be taken again prior to the hearing. Thank you very much for your time tonight.